Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an unseen, high-stakes battlefield at the very bottom of the ocean, one that quite literally powers our daily lives. We're talking about the silent digital war happening right now, right beneath the waves. But before we get into the weeds, ask yourself something about the physical reality of this cloud we're all using every single day. When you shoot off an email, binge a show, or when the market executes a high-frequency trade, where exactly does all that massive data actually go? I mean, we've kind of been conditioned to think our digital world is just floating around up there, like actual fluffy clouds bouncing off satellites or invisible wireless signals. Well, the startling truth, 99% of all digital communications across the entire globe are not in the air at all, not even close. They are carried by physical subsea fiber optic cables. We're talking about critical military comms, the entire internet, and literally trillions of dollars in daily financial transactions that keep our society breathing. It's wild to think about, but we are completely reliant on a physical network sitting way down on the ocean floor. That brings us to Section 1, the Internet's hidden backbone. Let's take a look at what this vital, invisible infrastructure actually looks like. So, our modern information ecosystem absolutely relies on these incredibly fragile cables just lying there, completely exposed in the murky depths. And honestly, these cables are often no thicker than a garden hose. They just rest right on the seabed in deep waters, or maybe they're lightly buried if they happen to be in shallow coastal zones. They're out of sight and, for a very long time, pretty much out of mind for government regulators and security officials. And because they're just sitting out there in the open ocean, these critical networks are unbelievably vulnerable. On any given day, they face accidental snags from things like dragged ship anchors or bottom-trawling fishing nets. If they're in colder climates, you've got environmental hazards like shifting ice scour to worry about. But increasingly, and this is the scary part, as geopolitical tensions heat up, they are facing the most complex threat of all: deliberate sabotage and espionage. Moving on to Section 2, the silent digital war. This extreme vulnerability has literally transformed the seabed into a brand new theater for geopolitical conflict. State actors know that targeting a nation's undersea infrastructure can bring its economy and military to an absolute standstill. The crucial thing to understand here is the gray zone. Hostile state actors can inflict catastrophic damage using non-military or just regular commercial vessels. By operating in this gray zone, which is basically that murky space just below the threshold of all-out armed conflict, attackers get to maintain plausible deniability. I mean, if a commercial cargo ship randomly drops an anchor on a critical cable in international waters, the nation directing that ship can just shrug and say, "Oops, our bad, total accident." They minimize their risk of military retaliation while still imposing massive, massive costs. Let's break down how this actually operates. Take the highly sophisticated capabilities of units like Russia's GUI, for example. Western officials have noted that these units are actively out there mapping critical national infrastructure to prepare for potential disruptions. They deploy these specialized spy ships, like the Russian vessel Yantar, which are heavily equipped to drop deep-sea submersibles fitted with mechanical manipulator arms. These are tools that can physically tap into military communications or even plant remote explosives. Explosives that could just sit there, waiting to be detonated on day one of a future conflict. Which leads us right into Section 3, sabotage in the gray zone. Because guys, this isn't just some theoretical, far-off sci-fi threat. We are already seeing unprecedented disruptions happening right now in highly strategic waterways. Just look at this timeline. There's a dramatic, very recent uptick in severed infrastructure. You've got the Svalbard fiber cable near Norway and the Nord Stream pipelines in 2022, then the Baltic Connector pipeline in 2023. The pace of these incidents is completely alarming, and just recently, in early 2024, crucial cables in the Red Sea were severed by the anchor of a cargo ship that was sunk by Houthi militants. That single event reportedly degraded a massive 25% of the total internet and telecom traffic between Europe and Asia. Just let that sink in for a second. But the real danger here? Fixing these incidents is an absolute nightmare. Take that 2022 Svalbard incident, for example. A vital cable was severed at a depth of 700 meters. The initial police investigation couldn't even definitively prove criminal intent, which again perfectly highlights that gray zone ambiguity we just talked about. But here's the kicker: the repair process took nearly 18 months. Why? Because the global fleet of specialized cable repair ships is surprisingly tiny and definitely not just sitting around waiting for a call. If a coordinated attack hit multiple cables at once, the backlog for repairs could literally cripple a nation for years. Section 4, the new Arctic frontier. To find shorter routes and dodge those heavily congested global choke points, the cable industry is now looking toward a completely extreme new environment, the Arctic. Capitalizing on shrinking ice cover, historic projects like the Far North Fiber and Polar Express are racing to lay down the very first trans-Arctic cables. The goal is to link Europe, Asia, and North America, essentially carving out a brand new digital highway right at the top of the world. Now, there's a pretty stark contrast between the strategic rewards of an Arctic route and the brutal physical risks of operating under the ice. On one hand, yes, you get the shortest geographical route with way less commercial ship traffic, so theoretically fewer accidental anchor drops. But you're trading that for the severe threats of shifting icebergs, degrading subsea permafrost that can totally destabilize the cables, and incredibly difficult access for emergency repairs. You'd often need specialized icebreakers just to reach the site. Furthermore, there is serious environmental pushback. Conservation groups argue that exploiting the melting ice for infrastructure brings mechanical disruption and noise to an incredibly fragile and pristine ecosystem. The high-pressure water injection and plowing they use to bury cables, that disrupts benthic habitats. Plus, there are major concerns about vessel noise stressing out migratory marine mammals, like bowhead whales. Not to mention worries that the whole installation process could accelerate the melting of subsea permafrost, potentially releasing trapped greenhouse gases. Plus, electromagnetic fields might even affect marine life. It's a massive environmental trade-off. This brings us to our final part, Section 5, Defending the Deep. So, with the harsh environment posing one set of challenges and aggressive geopolitical rivals posing another, how do nations actually protect an invisible network spread across the vast international oceans? Well, organizations like NATO are urgently trying to shift from a reactive posture to a proactive one, to detect these gray zone threats before they can cut the cord. Through efforts like the Digital Ocean Initiative, they're working to build a global network of situational awareness that spans all the way from the seabed up to space. We're talking deploying AI, unmanned surface vessels, and advanced drones. There's also a major push to integrate smart sensors directly into commercial cables, to monitor the environment and detect tampering in real time. But getting this done requires a whole new level of deep cooperation between governments and the private tech companies that actually own these cables. However, the ultimate challenge remains attribution, which creates a massive deterrence dilemma. Think about it. Protecting these assets in international waters is nearly impossible when literally any passing civilian vessel can act as a weapon just by carelessly dragging its anchor. When an adversary uses plausible deniability to mask a deliberate attack as mere maritime clumsiness, it makes it incredibly difficult for governments to legally prove intent and respond militarily without risking massive, uncontained escalation. As Captain David Fields, a former UK naval attaché, pointed out, adversaries have invested a ton of time, money, and effort into mapping critical national infrastructure. Why? To attack covertly or overtly in a way that prevents escalation to an actual war. Their goal isn't necessarily to blow up a city with missiles. It's far more insidious. It's to quietly turn off the lights, sever the data, and cripple the financial systems, hoping to completely undermine political will and social cohesion without ever firing a single traditional shot. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. As our daily lives, our economies, and our absolute security become entirely dependent on a few fragile strands of fiber optic glass sitting silently at the bottom of the ocean, if the lights and data in this silent digital war were suddenly switched off tomorrow, how long could our society actually function? Are we truly prepared for the day the deep suddenly goes dark? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.